She didn't call a press conference. She didn't leak anything to a reporter. She didn't even say a word. She just hit follow. And somewhere inside the Indiana Fever's front office, a phone buzzed, someone saw the notification, and the room got very, very quiet. Because when Sabrina Ionescu, franchise cornerstone of the New York Liberty, reigning champion, one of the most calculating competitors in the history of women's basketball, quietly follows a Fever player on Instagram in the middle of free agency season, that is not a coincidence. That is not fan behavior. That is not two athletes being friendly across league lines. That is a chess move. And Indiana just realized they might be 3 moves from checkmate. Here's what makes this so alarming for Fever fans and so fascinating for everyone else. The WNBA doesn't operate like the NFL. There are no blockbuster trade deadlines with wall-to-wall ESPN coverage. There are no press conferences announcing mutual interest. Recruitment in this league happens quietly, deliberately, through soft signals and closed-door conversations that never make the news until the damage is already done. By the time an offer sheet gets formally submitted, the real negotiation has been over for weeks. The player already knows where she's going. The agent already knows what the number looks like. The competing team already knows whether the incumbent can match it. Ionescu's follow is that soft signal. It just happened to be visible to everyone. The player she followed is Lexie Hull. And if you don't immediately understand why that name matters, you need to. Hull is one of the most quietly indispensable players on Indiana's roster. She doesn't lead the team in scoring. She doesn't dominate highlights. She doesn't have a signature moment that casual fans can point to. But anyone who has watched this Fever team closely over the last 2 seasons understands exactly what she provides and exactly how difficult she is to replace. Elite perimeter defense. Knockdown corner shooting under pressure. The kind of off-ball discipline and physical toughness that championship-caliber teams are built around. She is the connective tissue that holds Indiana's defensive identity together, and she is entering free agency at precisely the worst possible moment for the franchise trying to keep her. She is a restricted free agent. Which means Indiana technically has the right to match any offer she receives. Which means, at least on the surface, the Fever are protected. Except they're not. Not really. Not when you understand what restricted free agency actually means when a cap-rich, championship-hungry organization like New York decides to make its move. And not when you zoom out and look at the full financial picture of what Indiana is managing right now. The Fever are not operating from a position of strength this offseason. They are operating from a position of controlled desperation, a team trying to hold together a championship-contending roster while the sport's financial landscape shifts beneath them faster than their salary structure can adapt. Caitlin Clark changed women's basketball. She changed attendance, changed television ratings, changed merchandise revenue, changed the entire commercial ceiling of the WNBA. What she has not yet changed, what the league has not yet caught up to, is the salary cap. The money flowing into the sport has exploded. The cap constraints have not moved at the same speed. And Indiana, the team at the absolute center of that financial transformation, is the franchise most trapped by the gap between those two realities. They have elite players who need to be paid. They have a cap structure that was built for a different era. And now they have Sabrina Ionescu, playing for a city with unmatched commercial infrastructure and an organization that just demonstrated it knows how to build a winner, sending a very deliberate message to one of their most important role players. The timing is not accidental. Nothing about this is accidental. The Liberty know exactly what Indiana is dealing with. They know the numbers. They know the constraints. They know that a well-structured offer sheet could put the Fever in a position where matching means breaking something else, and not matching means watching a key piece of Caitlin Clark's supporting cast walk out the door right in the middle of her championship window. This is the situation Indiana finds itself in. And it was building long before Ionescu ever touched that follow button. To understand why this moment is so dangerous for Indiana, you have to go back further than most people are willing to go. You have to go back to before Caitlin Clark ever set foot in a Fever uniform. Before the sellouts. Before the national television ratings. Before the merchandise lines and the sponsorship deals and the cultural moment that turned a WNBA regular season game into must-watch television for people who had never previously cared about women's basketball in their lives. You have to go back to the roster Indiana built, and the financial commitments they made, in the world that existed before all of that arrived. Because that's where the trap was set. Not this off-season. Not when Ionescu hit follow. The trap was set seasons ago, through a series of roster construction decisions that were entirely reasonable at the time and are now quietly strangling the franchise at the exact moment it needs the most flexibility. Here is the core tension that nobody is talking about clearly enough. The Fever are simultaneously one of the most valuable franchises in women's sports right now and one of the most financially constrained teams in the WNBA. Those two things should not be able to coexist. In a healthy financial ecosystem, the team generating the most revenue, the most attention, and the most commercial interest would have the cap flexibility to match that status. They would be able to retain their players, absorb market rate contracts, and build around their cornerstone the way a franchise of Indiana's current profile deserves to build. But this is not a healthy financial ecosystem. Not yet. The WNBA is mid-transformation, somewhere between the league it was 3 years ago and the league it is rapidly becoming, and the teams caught in that transition window are operating with new era revenue and old era cap rules at the same time. Indiana is caught harder than anyone. Caitlin Clark's contract is the starting point for understanding why. She is the most marketable athlete in women's basketball history, possibly the most marketable female athlete in American sports right now, and she is playing on a rookie-scale deal that does not come close to reflecting her actual value to the franchise or to the sport. That is not a criticism. That is just how the rookie wage scale works. But what it creates is a bizarre inversion where the player responsible for the Fever's entire commercial renaissance is also the player whose salary creates the least cap pressure. While the players around her, the veterans who were signed before Clark arrived, are locked into contracts that reflect a market that no longer quite exists. The roster Indiana assembled was built to be competitive. It was built with real intent and real investment. And for a WNBA team operating in the pre-Clark financial reality, it was reasonable construction. Multi-year commitments to veteran contributors. Market rate deals for experienced players who filled genuine needs. The kind of roster depth that a franchise building toward a playoff window is supposed to accumulate. The problem is that Caitlin Clark arrived and compressed everything. The championship window didn't open gradually. It didn't give Indiana time to restructure, to phase out older commitments, to let certain contracts expire naturally while replacing them with new deals calibrated to the new financial reality. The window blew open almost overnight, and suddenly a roster that was built on a multi-year development timeline found itself expected to compete for a championship right now, this season, with the exact contracts that were already on the books. And those contracts have a collective weight that makes adding anything, or matching anything, genuinely complicated. This is not speculation. You can see it in the numbers, in the decisions Indiana has already been forced to make, in the quiet off-season moves that revealed the constraints the front office is operating under even when they weren't explicitly acknowledging those constraints publicly. Every team in the WNBA has salary limitations. That's the nature of a capped league. But not every team is simultaneously managing legacy contract weight, a franchise player on a below-market rookie deal, and a free agency class that includes multiple key contributors who are about to discover their market value in a sport that is, for the first time in its history, generating the kind of revenue that creates real bidding wars. Indiana is managing all three at once. And Lexi Hull is not the only name on that list that should concern Fever fans. She is just the one that Sabrina Ionescu decided to flag first. Which means she is the one Indiana has to solve first. Loudly. Decisively. In a way that sends a message back to New York that the Fever are not going to be picked apart piece by piece while their championship window ticks. The question is whether they actually have the tools to do it. Based on the cap math, the answer is more complicated than anyone in Indiana wants to admit. Let's talk about the money. Because this is where the story stops being about basketball and starts being about math. And the math is brutal. Lexi Hull is about to find out what she is worth in a WNBA free agent market that has been fundamentally repriced by the Caitlin Clark era. And what she is worth, what the open market will actually offer her, is almost certainly a number that Indiana will struggle to absorb without breaking something else on the roster in the process. To understand Hull's market value, you need one reference point above everything else. Bridget Carleton. Earlier this offseason, Carleton signed with the Minnesota Lynx for $1.4 million per year. That number did not make the kind of headlines it deserved, but inside every WNBA front office, every player agent and every free agent negotiation happening right now, it is the most important data point in the room. Carleton is an elite 3-and-D wing. She defends at a high level, shoots reliably from the corners, communicates on the perimeter, and brings the kind of playoff-tested toughness that contending teams specifically build around. She is, functionally, the same type of player as Lexi Hull. Same role. Same profile. Same value proposition to a team trying to win a championship. Carleton may have a slight edge in overall impact, but not a dramatic one. The gap between them is real but narrow, and in a free agent market where that skill set is scarce and multiple organizations have cap space to spend, narrow gaps do not produce dramatically different contract offers. If Carlton reset the market at $1.4 million, Hull's asking price lands somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million per season on a conservative estimate. Possibly higher if a bidding situation develops and a cap-rich team decides Hull is exactly the missing piece they need. That range might not sound catastrophic in isolation. But place it inside Indiana's current committed salary structure and it creates a problem that does not have a clean solution. The Fever are not a team with open cap space sitting in reserve, waiting to be deployed. They are a team that is already navigating significant financial commitments to multiple players simultaneously, in an off-season where several contributors are going to market at the same time, each with legitimate claims to compensation that reflects their value in the post-Clark WNBA landscape. Hull is the most visible name. She is not the only name. And this is where Indiana's situation shifts from complicated to genuinely precarious. Because restricted free agency, the mechanism that is supposed to protect the Fever here, only works as a protection if the team holding the matching right can actually afford to exercise it. The right to match is meaningless if matching one offer sheet forces you to make a move elsewhere that weakens the roster you were trying to protect in the first place. New York understands this. That is not a coincidence. That is strategy. The Liberty are not pursuing Lexi Hull because they desperately need a 3-and-D wing and she happens to be available. They are pursuing Lexi Hull because acquiring her accomplishes two things simultaneously. It improves their roster. And it forces Indiana into a financial decision that creates ripple effects across every other negotiation the Fever are trying to manage this offseason. This is how championship organizations operate when they are serious about dynasty building. They do not just try to get better. They try to make the competition worse at the same time. They find the leverage points in a rival structure, they apply pressure at precisely those points, and they let the math do the rest. New York has studied Indiana's cap situation. Their front office knows what the Fever are committed to. They know what Hull's market value looks like. They know what matching a competitive offer sheet would cost Indiana not just in dollars but in flexibility, in other roster decisions, in the downstream consequences that would play out over the next 2 or 3 seasons. Ionescu's follow was not an impulsive moment of social media activity. It was the first visible signal of a coordinated organizational strategy that has been in development for weeks, possibly longer. The Liberty want Hull. But more than that, they want Indiana to feel the full weight of deciding whether to keep her. Because either outcome serves New York's interests. If the Fever let Hull walk, they lose one of the most important role players on a championship contending roster. If they match, they absorb a financial hit that constrains every other move they need to make this offseason. There is no version of this situation where Indiana comes out unscathed. That is what a well-executed recruiting play looks like in the modern WNBA. It does not have to succeed to be effective. It just has to force the other team into an impossible choice. And Indiana is standing at that choice right now, staring at a number they may not be able to match and a roster they cannot afford to dismantle. But here is what makes all of this so much more urgent than a standard free agency battle between two franchises competing for a role player. This is not happening in a vacuum. This is happening inside a 3-year window that represents something far larger than any single contract negotiation. This is happening inside Caitlin Clark's championship timeline. And that changes everything. There is a clock running in Indianapolis. Most people can feel it. Very few people are talking about it directly. It is not the kind of clock that shows up on a scoreboard. It does not have a buzzer. It does not announce itself. But it is running. It has been running since the moment Caitlin Clark was drafted, and every single roster decision the Indiana Fever make from now until the end of this decade needs to be understood in the context of what that clock represents. Championship windows in professional sports are not infinite. They are not even long. They are narrow, compressed, brutally unforgiving stretches of time when a franchise's talent, health, contract structure, coaching, and organizational competence all align closely enough to give a team a legitimate shot at the ultimate prize. Miss the window and you do not simply try again next year with the same group. Miss the window and players age out, contracts expire, the roster disperses, and rebuilding starts from scratch. Indiana's window is open right now. It opened the moment Clark arrived and immediately became the most dominant force in the WNBA's commercial landscape. But open does not mean unlimited. Open means pressurized. Open means every offseason decision carries stakes that a team outside the window simply does not face. Here is the timeline that every Fever fan needs to internalize completely. Caitlin Clark is 22 years old. She is on a rookie-scale contract that runs through the near term at a number that does not reflect her market value or her impact. When that deal expires, she will be eligible for a max extension, and that max extension, under current WNBA salary structures, will be the largest contract the franchise has ever built around. It will consume a significant portion of Indiana's cap space in a way that makes everything around her more difficult to fund. That is not a problem. That is an inevitability. You pay your franchise player. You build around the commitment. Every championship organization in professional sports history has navigated some version of this exact dynamic. But the window before that extension kicks in, the seasons where Clark is performing at a generational level on a below-market rookie deal, that window is the most valuable financial period Indiana will have for the foreseeable future. These are the years when the Fever theoretically have the most flexibility to build the supporting cast that a championship run requires. These are the years when the math should be working in their favor, when the gap between what Clark costs on paper and what she actually generates for the franchise creates space to invest in the pieces around her. Except that space is being eaten alive by the legacy commitments already on the books. And now, right in the middle of this critical period, one of the most important pieces of Clark's supporting cast is being targeted by the most strategically sophisticated franchise in the Eastern Conference. Think about what Lexie Hull actually means to this team beyond the stats. Beyond the defensive metrics and the shooting percentages and the analytical profile that makes her attractive to other organizations. Think about what she means to how Indiana actually functions as a basketball team in the moments that matter. She is one of the players Clark trusts on the floor when games get hard. She is one of the defenders who allows the Fever to switch assignments and maintain defensive integrity without creating exploitable mismatches. She is one of the shooters whose gravity off the ball creates the spacing that makes Clark's drives and pull-up jumpers exponentially more dangerous. Remove her and you do not simply subtract her individual production from Indiana's total output. You alter the geometry of how the offense operates. You create defensive vulnerabilities that opponents will identify and attack immediately. You change the texture of what this team is capable of in a playoff environment. Role players of Hull's profile are not easy to replace. They are not available on the open market at a discount because another team failed to appreciate them. Teams that let players like Hull walk do not quietly find equivalent replacements in the next draft class. They feel the absence for years, in games that are decided by the margins that players like Hull control. Indiana built something real around Caitlin Clark. That is not in dispute. The supporting cast the Fever assembled, the pieces that complement Clark's game, protect her defensively, space the floor for her, and give her a functional team rather than just a stage, represents genuine organizational work. Real decisions made thoughtfully over real time. New York is now trying to dismantle one of those pieces. Specifically, deliberately. With full awareness of the timing and the financial constraints that limit Indiana's ability to respond. And the Fever cannot simply absorb the hit and move on. Not this offseason. Not with the other financial decisions simultaneously pressing against the same cap ceiling. Not with the clock on Clark's championship window already running. Every season that passes without Indiana winning a title is a season they cannot recover. The window does not pause while the front office figures out the cap math. It does not wait while restricted free agency processes play out and offer sheets get submitted and matching decisions get made. It just keeps moving. Which is why what New York is doing right now is so much more than a roster acquisition play. It is a direct assault on the most important 3-year stretch in Indiana Fever franchise history. And the Liberty are executing it with a level of precision that should genuinely frighten every person invested in Caitlin Clark's championship timeline. Because Lexie Hull might just be the beginning. To understand what New York is actually building, you have to stop looking at this as a single transaction and start looking at it as a blueprint. Because the Liberty are not improvising. They are not opportunistically circling Indiana because a free agent happened to become available and Sabrina Ionescu felt like sending a friendly signal across league lines. What New York has been constructing over the last several seasons is one of the most deliberately engineered roster acquisition strategies in recent WNBA history. And once you see the full architecture of what they have been doing, Ionescu's follow stops looking like a moment and starts looking like a chapter in something much longer. Start with what the Liberty already have. They won a championship. That fact alone changes every recruitment conversation they will ever have from this point forward. Winning does something to an organization's gravitational pull that money alone cannot manufacture. Players want to be part of winning environments. Agents steer their clients toward franchises where the infrastructure for success is already proven. When New York sits across from a free agent target and makes its pitch, the championship banner is in the room before anyone says a single word. Indiana cannot put that in the room yet. Then add the market. New York City is not Indianapolis. That is not a criticism of Indianapolis. It is simply an acknowledgement of commercial reality. The endorsement opportunities, the visibility, the lifestyle infrastructure, the media exposure that comes with playing in the largest market in the country, all of it represents genuine value to a professional athlete that does not show up in the salary line of a contract but absolutely factors into the total compensation calculus that players and their representatives run when deciding where to play. A player choosing between New York and Indiana is not just choosing between two basketball organizations. She is choosing between two entirely different professional ecosystems. And the Liberty know how to make that case. They have been making it effectively for years. Then add the cap structure. New York has managed their financial commitments with the championship window in mind. They have not overloaded themselves with legacy contracts that restrict flexibility. They have maintained enough space to move aggressively when the right target becomes available. And right now, the right target is available, the timing is perfect, and Indiana is sitting across the chessboard with fewer pieces than the Liberty and less room to maneuver. This is not luck. This is construction. This is an organization that identified what it needed, managed its resources to create the ability to acquire it, and is now executing the final step of a plan that has been in development far longer than this offseason. And here is the part that makes this genuinely uncomfortable for Indiana beyond just the Lexi Hull situation specifically. If New York's strategy works, if the Liberty successfully pull Hull away from the Fever, either by making the financial cost of matching prohibitive or by creating a situation where Hull herself prefers the move, it does not stop there. It cannot stop there. Because the same logic that makes Hull an attractive target for New York makes every other Fever role player in a similar contract situation an equally attractive target. The blueprint, once proven, gets applied again. Indiana is not just defending one free agent this offseason. They are defending a roster philosophy, a competitive identity, and a financial structure against an organization that has identified the structural weaknesses in all three and is methodically applying pressure to each one. The Lexi Hull situation is the test case. It is New York finding out exactly how Indiana responds when put in an impossible financial position. How aggressive they are willing to be. How much they are willing to sacrifice elsewhere on the roster to retain a single contributor. How their front office behaves under genuine pressure. The Liberty are learning Indiana's decision-making process in real time. And whatever they learn from this negotiation will inform how they approach the next one. That is the layer of this story that has received almost no attention in the coverage that has dominated the last several weeks. Everyone is focused on Hull specifically, on the Instagram follow, on the restricted free agency mechanics, on whether Indiana can match the number. Those are legitimate focuses. But they are missing the larger strategic picture that makes this moment so consequential. New York is not just trying to acquire Lexi Hull. They are trying to acquire information. They are trying to understand Indiana's limits. They are mapping the Fever's vulnerabilities with the explicit intention of exploiting them not just now but repeatedly, systematically, over the course of the same championship window that Indiana is desperately trying to protect. Sabrina Ionescu understood this when she hit follow. She is not just a player trying to recruit a teammate. She is the visible face of an organizational strategy that operates several moves ahead of the moment everyone else is watching. And Indiana's front office is now facing a decision that is about far more than one contract. Because how they handle Lexi Hull tells New York, and every other franchise watching this situation develop, exactly how much pressure the Fever can absorb before something breaks. That answer will define Indiana's competitive reality for the next 3 seasons. Which means it will define whether Caitlin Clark gets the supporting cast she deserves during the most important stretch of her career. The stakes could not be higher. And the Fever are running out of time to demonstrate they understand that. But there is one more dimension to this story that nobody has fully reckoned with yet. It is the dimension that lives not in the front office, not in the cap sheets, not in the Liberty's organizational blueprint, but in Lexi Hull herself. Because she has a choice to make. And the factors shaping that choice are more complicated than most people realize. We have spent a lot of time talking about franchises, about front offices and cap sheets and organizational strategies and championship blueprints, about what New York wants and what Indiana can afford and what the math says about who holds leverage in this situation. But at the center of all of it is a human being who has spent her entire professional career building toward exactly this moment. Lexi Hull is not a chess piece. She is not a cap number. She is not a restricted free agent designation in a league transaction database. She is a professional athlete who has earned the right to make a decision about her future on her own terms, with full awareness of everything that decision means for her career, her finances, her competitive aspirations, and her life. And the factors shaping her decision are more layered than the contract number alone. Start with where she is in her career arc. Hull has spent her time in Indiana proving something. Proving that she belongs at this level, that her defensive impact is real and sustainable, that her shooting is reliable under pressure, that she is the kind of player a contending team can trust in the moments that define seasons. She has done that work quietly, consistently, without the spotlight that follows Clark everywhere or the narrative attention that gravitates towards stars. She has been the professional's professional, the player that coaches trust, teammates rely on, and opponents game plan for even when the cameras are pointed somewhere else. That kind of career builds toward a payday. It builds toward a moment when the market finally catches up to what you have been providing all along, when the numbers on an offer sheet reflect the actual value you have been generating rather than the below-market rate of an underpaid contributor on a team that needed you more than it was paying you. Hull is at that moment right now. And Sabrina Ionescu just made sure she knows it. The follow was not just a message to Indiana's front office. It was a message to Hull personally. It said you are valued. It said a championship organization sees what you do and wants it in their building. It said there is a market for you that extends well beyond the team that currently holds your rights, and that market has resources and is serious. That message lands differently depending on where Hull is mentally heading into this negotiation. If she is fully committed to Indiana, fully invested in the Caitlin Clark project, fully convinced that the Fever are building something she wants to be part of long-term, the follow is an interesting signal that she files away while focusing on working out a new deal with the organization she already calls home. But if there is any part of Hull that wonders what playing in New York would look like, what it would mean for her commercial profile, her visibility, her life outside basketball, then Ionescu's follow does not stay filed away. It stays front of mind. It becomes the first thing her agent references in every conversation. It becomes the option that everything else gets measured against. And the honest reality is that players in Hull's position, at Hull's stage of career development, almost always have some version of that wondering. It would be strange if she didn't. New York is New York. A championship roster is a championship roster. Sabrina Ionescu is one of the best players alive. The opportunity to compete for a title in the largest market in the country alongside a player of that caliber is not something a rational professional dismisses without at least seriously considering. Indiana knows this. That is part of what makes the front office's position so uncomfortable. They are not just trying to win a contract negotiation. They are trying to win a human being's genuine preference. And those are two very different competitions with very different tools available to the team trying to win them. The contract negotiation gets resolved through numbers. Match the offer sheet, retain the player, absorb the financial consequence, move on. That part, however difficult, is ultimately mechanical. It is math with a deadline. Winning Hull's genuine preference requires something more. It requires Indiana to make a compelling case that the best version of her career unfolds in a Fever uniform. That the championship window around Caitlin Clark is real and imminent and worth being part of. That the organization is committed to building something that justifies the investment of her best years. That staying in Indianapolis is not settling for familiarity when something more glamorous beckoned. It is choosing to be part of something historically significant. That case is not impossible to make. It might even be a strong case depending on how you frame what Indiana is building and what the timeline for that build actually looks like. Clark is generational. The Fever's trajectory is genuinely upward. The argument that staying puts Hull at the center of a championship run that would define her legacy is a real argument with real merit. But making it requires Indiana to lead with conviction and clarity at exactly the moment their financial constraints are forcing them into reactive, defensive positioning. That tension, between the roster Indiana wants to be and the cap situation they are actually managing, is the defining contradiction of this entire offseason. And Lexi Hull's decision will reveal, more clearly than anything else this summer, whether the Fever have found a way to resolve it. Because here is the truth that sits underneath all of the strategy and the cap math and the championship window analysis. Lexi Hull has earned this choice. She has earned the right to weigh her options seriously, to understand her market value fully, to make the decision that is best for her career and her life without owing any organization a discount for loyalty's sake. Whatever she decides, she will have made it with the full weight of what both paths represent. Indiana has to hope that full weight lands in their favor. Because if it doesn't, if Hull looks at everything New York is offering, everything the Liberty represent, everything Ionescu's follow was quietly promising, and decides that the best chapter of her career gets written somewhere other than Indianapolis, the ripple effects inside that Fever locker room will be felt far beyond one roster spot. They will be felt in the confidence of a franchise trying to prove it can hold itself together under pressure. They will be felt in the message it sends to every other player on the roster watching how Indiana handles its most visible offseason test. And they will be felt in the championship window that is already running, already narrowing, and already carrying more weight than any single free agency decision should ever have to bear. The clock is still ticking in Indianapolis, and New York just made it louder.